Hello again, everybody. This is Brother Chooch for Thinking Out Loud About the End Times. We are excited to introduce to you for the first time the TOL End Times, the Rapture Big Board. So what exactly is Rapture Big Board? Well, it's probably equivalent to if you watch on major news networks on election night the map of the United States, and then they have it broken down to the various states in which the votes are coming in, whether they're leaning towards red or blue, whether Republican or Democrat, and you get an idea of where the trend is, what the votes are pointing to, who may be the next president of the United States. So as the night goes on, we get a clearer and clearer picture of what states will be casting their electoral votes towards either one candidate or the other. And then we get finally a determination when you see enough electoral votes come in who can be declared the president. Now, this board is not sophisticated to that level. However, what we've done here at TOL is we've taken what we see as the major areas of prophecy and how they're trending and where they're currently at, and we want to give it a score. And collectively, if we see these areas converging in prophecy, it probably will be pointing to the nearness of the rapture. Now again, we can't say for certain that we can declare a day or an hour based on this information and what's going on. However, we do know by Scripture that the season is something that we will be aware of, and that we look at these various areas of prophetic significance, and we could see this convergence is more and more pointing to the day of his return for the rapture of the church. So that's our little summary of what the Rapture Board is. And now we're going to systematically look at each one of these areas and break it down a little bit further. We're going to get a score, and we're going to see how this is working collectively and letting us know the nearness of the hour of his return. So thank you for joining us in this journey, and let's begin. In the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, in verse 6, we read, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Verse 7, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. When we listen to the words of Jesus as he speaks of wars and rumors of wars, this is one of the indicators that the end is on its way. Now, in my history on this planet, I have lived and heard of, I haven't fought in any, praise the Lord, wars and rumors of wars. However, I don't believe that I have ever lived in a time where I have heard more about the rumors of war than today. Now, there are certainly wars going on in the world presently. We know of the biggest one, which is Ukraine versus Russia. But there's also quite a few nations that are making threats towards other nations and speaking of war and attacks. So, if it's China and Taiwan, perhaps it's every so often we hear about North Korea. We certainly hear about Iran and Israel. And we can't forget about all of Iran's proxies that are pretty much always threatening Israel. There are certainly plenty of reasons where we could say that rumors of war is certainly aplenty in this time that we live in. Pretty soon, all those rumors of wars may become wars themselves. So as we consider this birth pang, this is pretty strong in the day that we live in. In fact, what would happen even economically if these countries that are threatening war were to actually go into war? I mean, we've certainly felt the impact on economics and trade, supply and demand, when the war took place between Russia and Ukraine, and even to this day, we're feeling the effects of that. If China and Taiwan, let's say, were to actually begin fighting with each other, I would probably have to predict that this is going to have a significant, if not major, impact on world economics. And obviously, when we read about in the book of Revelation the price of wheat and barley, and don't even think about touching the wine and the oil, we know that the economy more than likely will crash. And that is the world economy that we're speaking of. We're already living on quite a bubble of the world economy that is begging to burst. But when war breaks out, certainly the rider on the red horse seems to be approaching, and the black horse that follows is shortly behind. Because of all this, the current rating that the TOL Board of Directors have given for this particular category is a rating of 8.5 out of 10. There are certain biblical typologies that relate and connect to the end times. One in particular seems to stand out quite noticeably right now. When you think back of the great story of the life of Joseph, Joseph was given the ability by God himself to interpret dreams. Pharaoh had a disturbing dream of 7 cows that were fat in appearance And then afterwards, 7 lean and scrawny cows came on the scene in his dream and devoured the fat cows. Joseph was able to interpret Pharaoh's dream and thus save Egypt and eventually save his own family. And he interpreted the dream that there would be 7 years of plenty, representative as the fat cows, and then would come up 7 lean, scrawny cows that would devour the fat cows. So following the 7 years of plenty, there would be 7 years of famine. So this proper interpretation of the scripture allowed Pharaoh to give Joseph a high position, and also for Joseph to put his plans into place to make sure that there would be more than enough wheat for not only Egypt, but even surrounding nations. And so that came to pass. Interestingly enough, in the year of 2014, and if we look at the Jewish year, it's really 2014 into 2015, 2 cows were birthed that had very interesting markings on them. If you look at this picture, we see that one cow, and this is during the time of the Feast of Trumpets, was born with a 7 on her head. That's unmistakably a 7, but more of a thin 7. And then we have another 7 marking, unusual marking on this calf. That's a fat 7. Now, certainly all this could be coincidence, or perhaps it could be a sign for us, a subtle sign, that there are going to be 7 years, just like in Joseph's time in Egypt, 7 years of plenty, and then followed by 7 years of famine. So from 2014, 2015, up to 2021, 2022, we have experienced a wonderful, robust economy that's pretty much been worldwide. However, since 2022 has begun and progressed, we have seen a shift, and not a good shift if you are concerned about economics. We have seen an increase in inflation, probably not like we have in 20, 30 years. We have seen the price of goods in some categories double, if not more. We've seen the price of energy go way up, and we're feeling more and more in the middle class and the lower class how difficult it is to just get your necessities met because the price of goods have increased so much. Certainly the economy is on the ropes and ready to give out. Could it be that this biblical typology was speaking also of what would happen in the future before the tribulation period? Could the tribulation period be 7 years of famine and of want and of need? And right before that famine happens, that the world experiences 7 years of plenty? Well, obviously, this world is not prepared for 7 years of famine. But if this typology does connect, that would mean 2022, 2023, to 2029, even 2030, that we can expect a really difficult time economically, and also perhaps famine, hunger, scarcity of food and resources. This typology speaks about the time we're in now. And if this typology is a connection, that speaks strongly for the year of 2022 to possibly be the commencement of the tribulation period. Because of this connection, which seems to fit so nicely, The TOL Board of Directors has scored this a 9 out of 10. We are familiar with Revelation chapter 13 that speaks of the mark of the beast. Starting in verse 16, it says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Correct? So, if you look at the history of the world, there has never been a time where all the countries of the world shared the same exact process of buying and selling. This chapter speaks of a time in the near future where there will be only one way to buy and one way to sell. And it's going to involve a mark in or on the forehead and the right hand. Now, there's been much speculation and thought about what that will exactly look like. Will it be a tattoo? Will it be an RFID chip? We're not positive, but one thing that we're clearly sure of is that the term New World Order has been bantered around for decades now and is spoken of more now than ever before. And we have the World Economic Forum and other entities that are on fast forward to move this particular one government world system into reality and execute it where it is mandatory and in play. The table is being set for the Antichrist to come on the scene and be able to control what we all need to buy and sell goods in order to feed our families, to be able to be employed, and to be able basically to survive and function in the society that we live in. There is a new world order that is on the doorstep. There is an agenda that 2030. There are things that are in motion that are leading us to a place where one person could take rule, be able to control and regulate every human being on earth, and be able to stop their ability to receive the basic needs to live and to survive. Kind of scary. The Bible knew this, and it will come to pass in the very, very near future. Individuals like Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and many, many others are very much committed and on board for a new world order to be executed. Folks, this has been in the works for a very long time, and now we're seeing it happen right before our eyes. Wars, perhaps pestilences, are all causing alarm and people more than willing to give up their rights and their freedoms in order to be quote-unquote protected. This New World Order is a very serious part of the end times. So, because of this, the TOL Board of Directors have given this a score of 9 out of 10. We read in the book of Luke, chapter 17, starting in verse 28. Likewise also, as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, and they builded. By the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. We can see that the day that we live in seems to be very much like the days of Lot when he dwelled in Sodom and Gomorrah. And God himself rescued Lot and his family out of Sodom right before judgment was poured down from heaven. If you remember the story of Lot, we can clearly see that these people were entrenched in immorality, certainly sexual immorality, where the lust of men was for the two visitors that Lot had that appeared to be as men, and they demanded that Lot turn these two men that they could have their way with him. Well, we know how the story goes, that those two men were able to, probably angels, blind the people at the door and be able to rescue Lot and his family before judgment fell. Well, folks, today, if you haven't noticed, we have a celebration of sin, probably like never before. I would be so bold to even state that some of the things that are happening today would make the people of Sodom and Gomorrah blush. We have seen over and over again the letter of immorality be pushed further and further. At this rate, if the Lord does not intervene, just like sin always does, never being satisfied, pushing to the point of self-destruction and death, that immorality will grow to the point where we will land up destroying ourselves. Folks, immorality is at an all-time high, and it's not getting any better. The agendas that the governments have put into place have not only given the green light for immorality to take place, but even promote it. Folks, it's bad enough that mankind sins. But when you even start to celebrate and are proud of sin, you're begging for judgment. Because of the current immoral state that the world is in and where it's heading, the TOL Board of Directors have given immorality a score of 9 out of 10. As we have read earlier in the book of Luke, that there will be pestilences in the end times. We have seen one of the greatest impacts of a pestilence or a pandemic in the past few years like never before. This has altered people's lives and ended some. Pestilences, we know throughout biblical history, have been allowed at times by the Lord in order to discipline or waken a people or chastise a people. Because we are so close to the end times, we cannot shake off the fact that COVID-19 has greatly impacted us and potentially is a message from the Lord himself warning us about the days ahead. We are not done with experiencing pestilences. pandemics and plagues. They are here, there's more coming, and there's going to be more restrictions. Through all this creates an environment for those in authority and governments to put in their laws and get through their agendas as a people that are desperate for health and protection from the pestilences are more than willing to give up their rights to get that protection from the leaders. I believe that this will be utilized not only now but throughout the tribulation period to help influence and sway public opinion to allow an agenda that is going to restrict and control the masses to the point where they're willing to take a mark that I believe plays a big part of the government's plan to protect you from pestilences. Because we have just experienced a lengthy time of these restrictions, and perhaps this was a foreshadowing of what's soon to come, either right before or during or into the tribulation period, the TOL Board of Directors have decided to give a score of 8 out of 10 for this category of end times of pestilences. Also taken from the chapter of Matthew 24, we are well familiar with the parable of the fig tree, which speaks of the fig tree generation. We believe that God gave us this parable to get a general idea of the time of the end. Now, we have had much discussion on this channel and other channels about the length of a generation, and many have agreed that Psalm 90 verse 10 seems to connect the best to the length of time of the fig tree generation, which is the generation that saw the rebirth of Israel, and that generation will not fully pass away until they see all these things, which are the events including the second coming of Jesus Christ. When he touches down on the Mount of Olives. That'll be at the end of the tribulation period. If you take a literal stance that a generation is at the most 80 years, you will conclude that we have passed the window and that the fig tree generation connected to Psalm chapter 90 verse 10 is no longer applicable. As we have looked at in previous videos how biblical numbers can be used by rounding down or rounding up, if the author, which is the Lord, is trying to get across a message of around the time or around that number, it is more than acceptable to say that Psalm 90 verse 10 could be interpreted as 70-ish or 80-ish. So, if Israel happens to be 81 or 82 or even 83, to use the number 80 in the proper context of what the meaning of the passage is trying to get across, it is perfectly fine. Also, for those who are stringent on being literal, we can't rule out the idea that perhaps the Lord started the generation count not in 1948, but in 1949, where the War of Independence of Israel has been won and the government has been officially established. If that be the case, then we are still in that literal bang zone of the 70 to 80 years, as the Psalm explains. Regardless of the proper interpretation, we believe that the fig tree generation is very much in play in 2022 and even 2023. This, coupled with everything that we spoke of in the and the things that we're going to speak about in the near future, we believe that this sign, this parable, is very important. Because of this, the TOL Board of Directors have given this a 7.5 out of 10 score.